June and Jennifer Gibbons, born in 1963 in Wales, entered the world as identical twin sisters, whose extraordinary bond would both fascinate and confound those around them. Known as the Silent Twins, their story is marked not by a whimsical secret language, but by an almost impenetrable silence born of profound communication barriers and mutual dependence. From their earliest days, they developed a unique form of interaction that puzzled families, teachers, and experts alike, one that was far from a playful twin language, but instead characterized by a severe speech impediment and selective mutism. While the wider world struggled to understand them, the twins retreated ever deeper into an almost exclusive dialogue with each other, weaving a silent private world that shut out outsiders entirely. Growing up in a small, predominantly white Welsh community, June and Jennifer faced extraordinary challenges that compounded their isolation. As the only black children in their rural town, they were subjected to relentless and brutal racial bullying, a factor that shaped their childhood and magnified their sense of alienation. This spectacular racism was not mere playground teasing. It was a harsh and pervasive prejudice that marked them as outsiders, eroding any sense of safety or belonging beyond their twinship. The hostility of their environment was a crucible that forged their retreat into silence, making their twin bond not only a comfort, but a vital refuge in a world where they were otherwise rejected. From a young age, the twins moved and behaved in a strikingly synchronized manner, mirroring each other's every gesture and action with an almost uncanny precision. This mirroring extended beyond physicality into their interactions, or lack thereof, with others. Where they might have once spoken, their inability to be understood and the frustration that followed led to a withdrawal that enveloped both sisters. June later clarified that their so-called secret language was misunderstood by many. It was not an invented code, but rather an expression of a speech impediment that made their speech incomprehensible to others, including their own parents. Because nobody could understand them, they eventually stopped trying to speak to anyone outside their exclusive twin circle. Their silence was a survival mechanism, born out of a painful failure to connect in a world that simply couldn't hear them. Their restricted communication and synchronized behaviors entrenched their isolation. That silence was not just about sound, but a profound psychological barrier that kept the world at bay. Unlike many twin pairs who share inside jokes or playful invented languages, June and Jennifer's silence was shadowed by selective mutism, a psychological condition that made verbal interaction with others nearly impossible. Rather than a game or youthful whimsy, this silence was a deep wound inflicted by misunderstanding. Misunderstanding born of the combined forces of their speech difficulties, intense codependence, and the hostile social landscape they navigated daily. As the twins carefully constructed their mutual world, the external pressures on them intensified. The bullying they endured was relentless and often vicious, rooted in racial prejudice that isolated them further. In the schoolyard and community, their slow and synchronized movements, their near-exclusive communication with each other, and their withdrawn demeanor painted a target on their backs. The outside world, unable or unwilling to accommodate their difference, pushed them ever deeper into each other's company, where they found some measure of safety and control amid chaos and hostility. Early attempts to intervene in their silence and unusual bond met with little success. Therapists and educators tried to encourage the twins to communicate with others, but these efforts often only widened the gulf between the sisters and the world. In one particularly telling episode, the twins were separated and sent to different boarding schools in an attempt to foster independence and break their isolated connection. But this intervention backfired tragically. June became catatonic, withdrawing entirely from interaction, while Jennifer reacted violently, lashing out against other students. The separation, rather than helping, shattered the fragile equilibrium that their mutual bond provided. It became clear that their intense connection was a double-edged sword, both a barrier to the outside world and their only fortress against the pain of exclusion. This profound interdependence was not merely companionship, but a complex psychological bond fraught with tension. They were, in a sense, two halves of a single identity, struggling to maintain individuality within a shared existence. June expressed this poignantly, saying that sometimes they would wake and find themselves being each other, a testament to the depth of their intertwined psyches. Their relationship held a fierce love and an equally potent animosity. They fought viciously but were utterly lost when apart. Their silence was a manifestation of this struggle, a means to maintain connection and control when words failed or threatened their delicate balance. Within their private world, June and Jennifer indulged in rich imagination and creativity. Surrounded by dolls and fantasy, they authored a vast array of stories, plays, and novels, works filled with dark, violent themes that paralleled their own inner turmoil. Writing became their voice when speech failed, a way to express fears, desires, and the complex emotions they could not otherwise share. Yet their writings, centered around crime and violence, also reflected the shadowed dimension of their solitude. When their creative efforts failed to win external recognition or validation, frustration mounted, feeding the tension that would later contribute to their descent into risk-taking and delinquency. Their enigmatic silence and psychological bond perplexed mental health professionals who struggled to find fitting diagnoses. Some thought their language was a form of cryptophasia, a twin language, but June denied this, emphasizing the reality of their speech impediment. Diagnoses varied, from schizophrenia to autistic spectrum disorders and even personality disorders, none of which fully captured the unique complexity of their intertwined existence. Their condition has also been viewed through the lens of folie à deux, a shared psychosis where delusions or pathological beliefs are transmitted within a close relationship. This phenomenon helped explain the intensity of their bond, their synchronized behaviors, and eventually their tragic pact. Their case exposed the limitations of psychiatric understanding at the time and the dangers of imposing rigid diagnostic labels without fully grasping individual context. The twin sisters' silence, forged in a crucible of racial hostility and developmental challenges, was far from benign. It was both a protection from and a prison within the harsh reality they faced. Their synchronized movements, mirrored behaviors, and selective mutism represented a powerful psychological survival mechanism. It created a private sanctuary that shielded them from the cruelty and rejection that surrounded them, yet it also sealed their isolation and made them vulnerable to misunderstanding, marginalization, and eventual tragedy. The story of June and Jennifer Gibbons begins here, with this haunting, unbreakable, silent bond, a testament to the depths of human connection and the devastating consequences when the world turns away. Their silence was not simply the absence of speech, but a profound, tragic expression of their fractured world. As we delve deeper into their lives, we uncover a narrative of psychological mystery and human suffering that challenges our assumptions about identity, communication, and compassion. From silent, isolated children to troubled adolescents, the journey of June and Jennifer Gibbons reveals a haunting transformation marked by creative brilliance that gave way to criminality and incarceration. Their adolescence was far from ordinary. Beneath the surface of silence lay an extraordinary world of imagination and dark themes. The twins filled countless pages with diaries, novels, and plays that explored violence, crime, and the complexities of human nature. This prolific creativity showcased their intense inner lives, a stark contrast to the quiet, inscrutable exterior they presented to the world. Yet, their creative efforts met with rejection. Their writings, which they hoped would provide connection and recognition, were dismissed by mainstream publishers. This rejection deepened their sense of frustration and isolation at a time when they were already grappling with profound communication barriers and societal alienation. As a result, the twins began pushing boundaries in increasingly dangerous ways. It was during the early 1980s that June and Jennifer embarked on a chilling 5-week spree that shook their small Welsh town. What began as petty theft and vandalism escalated into acts of arson. One notable incident involved the burning down of a tractor store. The damage they inflicted on their community was sweeping and destructive, marked by random acts of wanton destruction and an apparent daring to be caught. June later reflected on this period as one of utter chaos and confusion, saying, "The two of us were out of our minds. We were out of our depth, beyond help. We started destroying the town, vandalizing places. We were sort of saying, we'll ring the police and see if they can catch us." Their motivations were as complex as their bond. The twins were driven by boredom and a desperate yearning for excitement beyond their isolated existence. Emotional turmoil, such as heartbreak after the departure of American brothers they were obsessed with, fueled a desire for revenge and attention. Influenced by these brothers, who encouraged dangerous behaviors including arson, and under the influence of drugs and alcohol, the twins spiraled into increased recklessness and criminality. Far from a calculated crime spree, it seemed to many observers a cry for help, a distorted attempt to connect with the outside world through acts of rebellion and destruction. The community's shock was met with a response that would alter the twins' lives forever. At just 19 years old, June and Jennifer were arrested and subjected to psychiatric assessment. Instead of receiving support or rehabilitation, they were sent to Broadmoor Hospital, one of Britain's most notorious high-security psychiatric institutions. This was a place reserved for the most dangerous and disturbed criminals, the likes of whom were considered threats to society. The twins' crimes, though serious within their context, were petty compared to the kinds of offences that typically warranted Broadmoor's confinement. What followed was a chilling miscarriage of justice. The twins were sentenced to indefinite detention under the Mental Health Act. Their inability or refusal to communicate verbally, stemming from deep psychological trauma and a severe speech impediment, was tragically misinterpreted by legal and medical authorities. June bluntly stated, "Juvenile delinquents get 2 years in prison. We got 12 years of hell because we didn't speak, but we were trapped." During their trial, their barely intelligible grunts were taken as guilty pleas, highlighting a grotesque failure of the justice system to meaningfully engage with their condition or afford them proper representation. Within Broadmoor's walls, the twins' ordeal deepened. The hospital housed some of the most feared criminals in Britain, yet June and Jennifer were not placed in a therapeutic environment, but endured a custodial regime marked by isolation and control. They were kept apart initially, a separation that sent them into catatonia and heightened their distress. When reunited, their volatile love-hate relationship erupted into violent outbursts, resulting in bloody fights. Their isolation and trauma were compounded by harsh treatments, including heavy doses of antipsychotic medications. These drugs dulled their minds and bodies, with Jennifer suffering from tardive dyskinesia, a devastating neurological side effect causing uncontrollable movements. Through it all, the twins maintained their intense psychological codependence. Their communication remained cryptic, their inner world largely inaccessible to caregivers. The system's punishment of their silence only heightened their suffering, reinforcing the tragedy of misunderstanding in which they were trapped. June later described waking each morning, hearing the jangling of keys in the hospital, a haunting echo of her imprisonment that lingered long after their release. This chapter of their lives exposes profound systemic failures, a justice system unable to accommodate difference, psychiatric institutions designed more for confinement than healing, and a society ill-equipped to understand or support two isolated young women whose language was not just silence, but a complex expression of trauma and resilience. June and Jennifer's incarceration in Broadmoor was less a reflection of criminality and more a reflection of profound misinterpretation, neglect, and the brutal consequences of a world unwilling or unable to listen. As we move forward in this story, the deep injustices and tragic missteps of their confinement come sharply into focus, setting the stage for one of the most haunting turns in their saga. In the haunting story of June and Jennifer Gibbons, the chapter that casts the darkest shadow is the one known as their sacrifice pact, a chilling agreement between the twins that one must die for the other to truly live. This chapter is not only the emotional climax of their intertwined existence, but also a profound psychological mystery that exposes the tragic cost of their inseparable bond. For years, June and Jennifer lived in a world of silence, locked in a mutually exclusive code of communication that shut out everyone else. Their shared identity was so fused that they struggled to express themselves independently, but buried deep within that silence was a desperate yearning for freedom, for one of them to break away and live a life beyond their self-imposed imprisonment. The pact they made was born out of this yearning, a pact that one sister's death would grant the other the chance to speak, to be free, to exist as an individual. This pact was no mere metaphor or casual hope. It was a solemn, conscious agreement that the twins carried with them, intensifying through their years detained in Broadmoor. Jennifer, the more withdrawn and enigmatic sister, accepted the role of the one to sacrifice herself. She confided to investigative journalist Marjorie Wallace, who followed their story closely, "I'm going to die. We've decided." This poignant declaration reveals the grim depth of their psychological entanglement, a shared delusion or perhaps an act of tragic altruism born of unbearable codependence. The final, surreal chapter unfolded shortly after their transfer in March 1993 from the maximum security Broadmoor Hospital to Caswell Clinic, a lower security facility in Wales intended as a step toward rehabilitation. Barely had they arrived when Jennifer was found unresponsive and rushed to the hospital, where she died shortly thereafter. The official cause was acute myocarditis, a sudden and severe inflammation of the heart muscle, which baffled doctors. Jennifer was young, previously healthy, and tests revealed no evidence of drugs or poison. No external cause could explain this violent and rapid decline. The circumstances surrounding Jennifer's death defy easy explanation. Days before, she had exhibited strange behavior, slurred speech, and ominous words that she was dying. During the journey, she reportedly rested with her eyes open in June's lap, a haunting image that underscores the surreal nature of their final moments together. That such a catastrophic medical event happened precisely at the moment one sister was poised to be liberated deepens the mystery in ways that are almost impossible to fully comprehend. For June, the death of her twin brought an immediate and profound transformation. In the wake of Jennifer's passing, June described feeling an overwhelming liberation, as if a vast and crushing burden had been lifted. She told Marjorie Wallace, "I'm free at last, liberated, and at last Jennifer has given up her life for me." She likened it to a tsunami, a tidal wave washing away the sins of the past, and finally freeing her from the suffocating shadows of their shared existence. Almost immediately, June began speaking normally, a dramatic shift that astonished everyone who knew their history. For years they had communicated in whispers, grunts, and an indecipherable tongue understood only between themselves. Now, June found that voice, which had been silenced within her, able to engage fully with the outside world. Her sudden fluency sparked debate and speculation. Was Jennifer's death a psychosomatic culmination of their shared psychological state? Was it a tragic sacrifice born from a delusion so powerful it caused physical death? Or was it a mysterious medical anomaly, unrelated yet symbolically catastrophic? This chapter of their story raises deeply unsettling questions about identity and autonomy. How much of Jennifer's death was a conscious choice? How much was coercion, whether explicit or implicit, within their codependent relationship? To what extent can two people be so intertwined that the survival of one necessitates the demise of the other? The ethical dilemmas posed by their pact echo the most profound quandaries in psychological and medical ethics, akin to debates over conjoined twins whose lives are so fused that saving one may cost the other. Moreover, the tragedy exposes the devastating effects of psychological coercion and shared delusion. The twins' reality was so enmeshed that boundaries of self and other blurred beyond recognition. Jennifer's death, within this context, can be seen as the ultimate price of a bond that both sustained and imprisoned them. It also forces us to consider how mental health systems and institutions respond to such complex interdependencies, whether they have the tools and understanding to recognize when a relationship becomes pathology and how to intervene without causing further harm. The lingering shadows of this pact stretch far beyond Jennifer's death. June's sense of liberation was bittersweet, marked by grief and the haunting presence of her sister within her own life. Though she gained a voice, June remains psychologically marked by years of codependence and trauma. Her story invites us to reflect on the tragic cost of intertwined existences, where love and dependence become indistinguishable, where liberation demands sacrifice, and where the boundaries of identity themselves may fracture in unbearable ways. As we turn from this darkest chapter, the story of the silent twins leaves us with haunting questions about the nature of selfhood, the limits of autonomy within shared minds, and the painful consequences when the systems meant to protect and heal fail those they are meant to serve. Jennifer's death was not just a medical event. It was the somber and surreal climax of a lifelong battle for freedom that neither sister could have fought alone. In the next chapter, we explore June's journey after her twins' passing, a journey marked by recovery, reflection, and a complex path toward finding her own voice in a world that once left them both voiceless. In the quiet aftermath of tragedy, life often unfolds in ways that blend healing with the shadows of enduring pain. For June Gibbons, the surviving half of the silent twins, this has been her reality, a journey marked by complex recovery and ongoing reflection on a bond that defined, confined, and continues to shape her existence. Following Jennifer's sudden and mysterious death in 1993, June's world shifted profoundly. Freed from the suffocating codependence that had enveloped them both, she began to speak normally for the first time, a transformation that sparked intrigue, debate, and a reassessment of their enigma. Yet, liberation was not synonymous with erasure. The scars of their shared past remain etched deeply within June's psyche. She articulates her persistent connection to Jennifer not as a vanished presence, but as an internal, enduring companion. Every day I wake up and say to myself, one more day for me and one more day for my sister. I live for her. What I see and do, she does as well. This testament reveals a layered coexistence, a living symbiosis where identity is not singular but fundamentally relational, shaped by a lifetime of intertwined experiences that no death could entirely sever. June's active participation in recounting their story has been a crucial part of her journey, most notably through the 2023 BBC podcast, June, Voice of a Silent Twin. This platform provided her a rare opportunity to frame their narrative on her own terms, dispelling decades of myths and misrepresentations that have surrounded the twins. The podcast's compassionate and unflinching exploration sheds light not only on their extraordinary psychological bond, but also offers a candid critique of the systems that failed them. June's voice carries the weight of lived experience, elucidating the profound misunderstandings that plagued their diagnosis and treatment. Central to this understanding is the critique of how mental health and justice systems approach the twins' unique presentation. June and Jennifer were caught in a web of misdiagnoses, labeled schizophrenic, psychopathic, or simply incomprehensible. These labels failed to capture the nuanced reality of their condition, which blended profound codependency, elective mutism born from speech impediments, and an intensely insular twin identity. The system's inability to see beyond conventional diagnostic categories led to a cruel cycle of neglect and punishment. Instead of receiving tailored support, the twins endured institutionalization under harsh conditions, heavy medication with debilitating side effects, and procedural injustices such as their grunts being taken as guilty pleas. Moreover, the intersection of race and mental health cannot be overlooked. As black children in a predominantly white Welsh community, June and Jennifer faced relentless racial prejudice and bullying that exacerbated their isolation. This external hostility compounded the challenge of their psychological condition, yet the systemic responses largely ignored this critical context. The failure to acknowledge and address these societal pressures represents a lamentable blind spot in both mental health care and criminal justice systems, one that contributed significantly to their tragic trajectory. The broader implications of the twins' story resonate across multiple disciplines. In twin psychology, their case underscores the complexities of identity formation within a profoundly intertwined relationship, challenging assumptions about individuality and autonomy. It highlights how pathological codependence can manifest and the psychological costs of severe isolation, especially when compounded by societal neglect and prejudice. For mental health care, it emphasizes the urgent need for culturally sensitive, individualized approaches that move beyond rigid diagnostic categories and recognize the unique lived realities of patients. The twins' experience is a poignant reminder of the dangers inherent in a one-size-fits-all model of care, particularly when it results in the criminalization rather than the healing of vulnerable individuals. From the perspective of criminal justice ethics, June and Jennifer's case calls for a profound reckoning. It reveals systemic failures in safeguarding the rights and dignity of individuals who communicate and relate differently. Their indefinite detention for minor offenses linked to misunderstood psychological states reveals a punitive system ill-equipped to handle complexity with compassion. The ethical imperative is clear. Justice must be attuned to nuance, safeguarding humanity even within frameworks of law and order. As we reflect on June's journey, the story of the silent twins lingers as a haunting legacy, a narrative about the limits of understanding, the depths of human connection, and the costs of societal indifference. It invites listeners not only to empathize with June's resilience and pain, but also to question the structures that failed both sisters. Their tale transcends a singular tragedy. It is a call to action for more humane, just, and insightful approaches to care, identity, and justice. In embracing their story with sensitivity and respect, we honor their voices and keep alive the crucial conversations about compassion in the face of complexity.